Hello, welcome to Reanimated. Are you ready to be titillated, disturbed? I find you disgusting. That's just me putting on an act as Santiago the vampire. It's me, Stuart, just in case you were concerned. And here is H.A. Conrad. Hello, H.A.
Hello or allo.
Allo? It's Reanimated podcast. Where's Allo from?
I don't know. Hello.
Bonjour. We are Reanimated. We are still talking about Interview with the Vampire. I'm a little bit concerned that there's not another episode already online for us to gush about next week, but
I am a little concerned as well.
huh.
However, I think we should dispense with destroying any kind of French language. Just saying.
They
Um,
do plenty of that on the show this week, so I don't think we have to be too concerned.
yes, they do. But in any case, but let's not worry about the next episode yet and just chat about this episode, which was very interesting.
The title of which I did like, and I like the presentation of it in the episode. Do you know what it means to be loved by death? And I
Mm,
think the elephant in the episode is also the great. I've already forgotten his name. Can't be that great. No, he is great. Ben Daniels, who
mm.
plays that Santiago, who
Yep.
shows up later in the episode, but is just magnifique. I do enjoy his work. But yeah, let's talk about him when we get to him. We
Yeah, and I will also say, again, this is one of those things when you read books or when you have an idea of what characters look like in your head, and then, they kind of not recast, but they cast them in a different way or have a reimagining. And I have to say, I'm very on board with what they are doing with the show, and how Santiago is described in the book is very different than this portrayal, but I think it's absolutely successful. Similarly, I think Armand is quite successful too. So, that, I will say that at the outset.
say more. Go more into detail about how Santiago is described in the book versus how he's
Well,
being
he's
presented.
supposed to be like, this Spanish vampire that's like, incredibly like that's the thing. Like all the vampires are just like incredibly beautiful creatures um and are sort of cast based upon, their descriptions are just, I think he was supposed to be um like luxurious black hair or something like that. So, like there's that. Armand is supposed to be like very specifically had auburn hair and is sort of like hails from like the Italian Renaissance or something. And that's one of the big things in the books is that there are beautiful paintings with Armand portrayed as like an angel.
Yeah, because his maker was like a Renaissance painter, right? Or no, actually,
Well, he was
a
older.
Roman.
He was older, but he was sort of
Yeah.
baking as a Renaissance painter. So they do take they have their own imagination of what these characters are, but I absolutely agree with it. I think that the casting is really um, excellent and the actors are excellent. And I really like, there were a few moments in this episode where I was just a little over the top, and we can talk about that. But
Found this one was a little slow.
yeah, I did too, but the ending was very good, I thought.
Yeah, the
So
the whole play, well, not just the play is like in the middle, but the play was captivating. And yeah, like kind of everything after they hooked up with the vampires really made the episode pop better. But I would say the first half, which is tough to get through if you're like kind of biding your time to get to the better stuff, in quotes.
right.
I don't know if you were not feeling that, but it was to me it was just a little bit of a challenge to get through the first half of the episode.
Yeah, it was definitely a little slower. It's still very beautiful. I like the portrayal of Paris. I just again the lighting, the costuming, the editing is really gorgeous. It felt a little too um like like they were kind of delaying. I don't want to call it delayed gratification, but a little bit felt like that. And I guess part of it was to some extent maybe the viewers feeling sort of the frustration that the vampires in Paris were feeling, just trying to figure out what was going on with Louis and Claudia and why they were in Paris and their motivations and things like that. So maybe that was a deliberate choice to make the audience feel what they were feeling, but it did feel like it could have moved along a little bit faster. I don't know that you needed that much sort of a precursor before they end up at the theater with Armand,
Yeah.
but that was
There's a fair amount of scenes in Dubai also where Malloy is doing the interview.
right.
And
And
you
for
know, I'm
the
kind of feeling for him in these scenes because Louis and Armand are weirdly after 77 years still like a giggly little couple who are super into each other.
it's even more than that. They have their little sort of like sort of coupley speak and just have these like little comments that are kind of annoying. They're like that couple that you're just like, ugh, like go and if you want to have those conversations in front of me, go and have them elsewhere because they're not they're almost like, don't you want to know what we're talking about kind of a thing, and it's kind of annoying. So I do feel a little bit for him there. And then there's also the part where he's there to do his job and they're sort of portraying or taking the narrative in a way that is a little bit ridiculous. And I think he's calling them out on that. So, sort of calling out the sort of melodrama as well, I think. So I thought that some of those were fun, but again, a little bit too much of that to me. I think that you could have edited that down a little bit. You could have gotten the same effect just by doing that.
I did enjoy the gamesmanship or whatever jousting is going on between Malloy and Armand and Louis, but more it's like Armand is kind of the general and Louis then like starts to rattle off these memories that Malloy has of his ex-wife and his hand shakes more when he's having these conversations and at one point in the episode Malloy just looks so broken
Hmm.
and like you know kind of surrenders and just says okay I'll do the interview or whatever.
Hmm.
I just thought that that was actually really interesting and maybe you need all of the build up to get to that but it's also a little bit tiresome to just hear Malloy being like a douchebag for 30 minutes. It's not even
Yeah.
that long but it's that much of the episode goes by before he's like okay yeah let's just I will stop saying that Paris sucks and you know cafe culture is boring because he is just
Yeah, it is.
antagonistic for no real reason. So we have these scenes of Claudia and Louis exploring Paris, exploring their new life together. He takes up photography. She wonders what his reason for living is. There's a lot of scenes that are you know kind of going back and forth between Dubai and Paris, with Louis trying to explain what they were up to. Armand saying we were just watching you from afar and you know fixing all your mistakes. And Malloy still giving Rashid a hard time. Yeah, by the time we get to the park where Louis goes to I don't know, find either a kill or maybe someone's just to make out with, he runs into well, he doesn't run into Armand. Armand is like hunting him and it comes in and approaches him. But
Yeah, and this is, the first time that Louis has seen really another vampire outside of Claudia Lestat. And this is what in
that's
that,
true because he never met Bruce.
right. But I mean, other than, the vampire that threw herself into the fire in front of them.
Oh,
But
well, yeah. Yeah.
um
And the
but
zombie vampire.
yeah, a little bit different. Yeah, so that was an interesting scene. I guess the one of the things that just really struck me, and this was, as I said, they do reimagining and things like that. I think that Armand is exactly what I thought he should be because he has another agenda and he has more knowledge and he's stalking Louis, he's getting more information. You get the sense, even though they are romantically evolved, and that is one of the things you learn during their little back and forth with Malloy, that they've been together for 70 years. But you still feel the manipulation. You still feel like Armand has more knowledge and is basically has the upper hand. and isn't revealing things. And he does an incredible job at portraying that here and portraying that both in the room with Malloy, also in the flashbacks. So that is kind of interesting to me. I think he's cast very well and he plays that power dynamic to the hilt. And it's kind of awesome to see, honestly. Um, the one thing that I do think, and I don't know, like I know you read the books a very long time ago, but sort of the tension about Claudia that stands out and that I don't, and I think they made a deliberate choice here is that in the book she really is like a kid. She's like 9 or 10 or something. So the fact that she is a child unaccompanied is a big deal. She stands out as being, and it's even more for her, just so incredibly frustrating because she can't really operate in the world solo. She needs somebody else to kind of help her get around so that she doesn't attract attention. And she's incredibly frustrated because she hasn't gone through puberty. She doesn't have the body of the woman. And they skirt that line here with the character of Claudia. They aged her up a little bit. So I don't know that that's quite as like that existence is hits as much. But I don't know what you think about it.
Yeah, they play with the idea at the dressmakers, right? Like the woman is kind of very dismissive of her, not only because she's American, and calls her French ugly, which it was, but also because don't play pretend, don't play dress up. But yeah, but then as the audience, we're like, that's a 20-something-year-old actor. It's not, even when they had cast what's who did they cast for this role in the movie?
Oh, Kirsten Dunst.
Kirsten Dunst, who was like 12, who was a child. Um, I do think, yeah, the character hits harder when she is a kid because that's part of her, her rage, her frustration and anger that carries through after she's lived for like 50 years as a 12-year-old or 10 or whatever she's supposed to be. I think that makes her character more tragic and it makes more sense that she would have as much angst as she does. Whereas this Claudia has some of that angst, not as much. She's a little more philosophical because and that makes her a better match for Louis in terms of a traveling companion and partner, vampire partner, not a romantic partner. But yeah, it's a little bit rounded edges, like it's not quite as hardcore. It's one of those choices they made. The other one was, making everything 120 years later or whatever, 130 years later, because this was all supposed to be happening in the late 1800s. But here they are in Paris, post World War II, which is a really interesting time to be in Paris, and I got to give them credit for that. Like, you
Yeah,
know,
and I think that that makes sense and honestly you know, kind of I think it makes sense and it's pretty interesting from a lot of different angles. So I think that's fine. But yeah, this whole interaction between them and the whole theater company is really fascinating. And I do think they do the same exact kind of idea with them, which is that they're living in plain sight, essentially. Um, under the guise of being some incredibly like kind of schlocky horror play, that kind of thing. So I think that's kind of interesting.
yeah, the fact that Santiago's actually flying, but has like a rope, attached to himself just for looks is super cool. Um, the fact that he terrifies the audience with his yelling, like he does that one really loud yell, and you see the whole audience kind of take a step back, everybody except for Claudia, I guess, and Louis. I love these scenes. But Ben Daniels just I don't know if you've seen Foundation on Apple TV Plus, HA.
I have not.
He was in the most recent season as like a tragic character, did an amazing job in that, and his filmography is quite deep. He's going to be in the next season of Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, and then I guess he was in The Crown, and he's done a bunch of stuff. But I find him very recognizable, but I can no longer really dial it into where from. Foundation is the most recent thing I've seen him in. Do you recognize him?
I do, but I cannot fleece him from like,
Yeah.
anything specific. But he's one of those
Yeah.
kinds of actors that's in just a ton of stuff.
He was also in Law and Order UK, which was a great sh- it's like he was in Law and Order for UK for 2 years, but that was th 4 seasons
Hmm.
because
Oh,
UK does things different.
it looks like he was in House of Cards. I
And
remember him.
House of Cards, yeah. But only for 7 episodes. So I don't know. Maybe that's where you remember him from. He's done a lot of stuff. He has quite a lengthy filmography. He's done a lot of theater and not as many movies as TV shows. But he's great, and he was in Rogue One. Um, he is fantastic. He is the standout for the whole episode, I would say. Yeah, and partially because he's literally in the spotlight. That's kind of the role he plays. He's the diva of the theater company. And Armand is there kind of like as the soft power, the quiet power behind the scenes, but I'd say it's arguable who's running the show, or at least it feels that way to me. You were saying that Armand is like more of a presence, and I don't know that I was feeling it in the theater scenes.
Oh, I think Armand is definitely a presence. I think Santiago is too. And there's certainly a power play between them. But Armand is definitely pulling the strings, and I think he's trying to make himself seem like he is not. But there's also a collective here in terms of what they're doing, and he kind of cautions Louis about this. But I also think that's a deliberate manipulation too, to sort of hide the fact that he is the one in charge. I think he is the one in charge. So, like I think that he does a really good job at being like, "Oh, I'm on your side." Um, and even cautions him about certain things that he's noticed. And one of those things is when they're talking to the theater company that there's like a portrait of Lestat on the wall. And this provides one of the most, to me, most annoying little scenes because it feels a little over the top because Molloy's like plays like soap opera music and
Yeah. Well, he also doesn't he affects like a Spanish or a Mexican accent,
yeah,
which I was like, that's okay.
little
Doesn't really feel that necessary.
bar and it's annoying. But um so their big reveal is it kind of falls like a lead balloon. Anyway. Um but
What the actual reveal in the room in the theater of the vampire, where she's like, "Who is that handsome man on the wall?" It doesn't 100% look like Lestat right away, but at least like until Santiago's like, "Oh, that's our founder." I mean, I know that he's related to the theater from like 100 years before, whatever the timeline's going to be in this show. Um, I thought that was actually a good reveal. If you don't know it's coming,
true.
it does play well in the theater. It's then the Malloy reaction. At first, I thought he was going to be honest and say, "I didn't see that coming. I should have seen that coming." But then he gets all, yeah, he gets campy with it.
Yeah. And the other part of the reveal, which they haven't even gone into yet, other than to say, there's like a lot of back and forth with Louis and Claudia about whether they'll associate with these vampires anymore, just because they do know Lestat and know him very well. And not only do they know him, he was the co-founder of their company, and
Yeah.
there's a veneration there that they're very clear about. And at this point, I think Louis' instincts are obviously correct because to me, it's very clear that they do know more. And even Claudia's like, "Oh, all they want to do is lick us," is what I heard in their heads. And
Yeah,
like,
Santiago asking them for who their maker was, the first thing he asks them. And
yeah,
even the lady who he's like, "Oh yeah, she does star charts for us." And she's like, "I don't really need to know the maker," but he cuts her off
yep,
and just like, yeah, who's your maker? Oh, you have the same maker?"
Mhm.
It's like he already knows,
Of course.
basically.
And
And these people do read minds, and they're talking about how they can, Louis and Claudia are yelling, have this really loud and stupidly loud conversation in their apartment after
also,
the
why would you
play.
just, mind read at that
Why
point?
not just keep it on a real quiet tip? Because yeah, they have neighbors. I feel like in these kinds of apartments, noise travels and you can hear what they're saying. And they're talking about he's a vampire and he we killed him and they can read our minds. And yeah, it seems like they're having a lot of this conversation really loudly. And even if the vampires aren't overhearing them, their human neighbors probably can.
Right. Um, but in any case, Claudia is too blinded by the sort of flash that she sees just in terms of and the attraction she sees in being able to, you know, socialize with more vampires. They're proud of being vampires, which she's like, we should be proud too.
Yep.
And so she's really enamored of this whole idea, whereas Louis is a lot more cautious, and as it turns out, definitely has a reason to be more cautious, based upon the conversation between him and Armand at the end that they flash back to. But you can also see from Claudia's point of view, this is it. This is what they've been looking for, and all this time is to find, people or vampires more like them. She's very much enamored of the idea that they are living this directly in the spotlight and just basically kill this woman on stage and apparently do this every night. Um,
Hmm.
where under the guise of it being like a theater, which it's, or that it's a little play, and the body of whoever they manage to snag gets dropped through the floor where everybody else takes a bow. So I don't know that they're entirely subtle about it, but they're kind of deliberately not being subtle about it. So she's really into that. Um, and she also calls out Louis for his attraction to Armand and makes like a pretty a pretty intense comment just about how she wishes she couldn't their thoughts because she does not want to know about their relationship.
That was
And
pretty funny.
so that's she's really, I mean, she is just I think that once the episode got moving, that their interactions in this particular fight was pretty good. And so that's like I think Delaney Hales is doing an amazing job, and there there's also definitely a little bit of a separation between Louis and Claudia at this point. She is very much sort of jumping right into this new community, and Louis is certainly gravitating towards Armand. And that none of that is more clear than at the sort of the ending scenes of this episode, where they, kind of go on a hunting trip with the other vampires around Paris, of course, riding little motorcycles with sidecars and that kind of thing.
Their little Vespa gang.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little laughable, but it's also it's cool. And like I like the way they shot this. It's just like Louis is taking his pictures. Claudia's like laughing maniacally and losing her mind. Santiago's making out with a vampire on his motorcycle. It just feels crazy and wild and abandoned. It's the kind of thing you would associate with some 20 somethings, not a bunch of like, 100-year-old. But that's kind of the that everlasting life sort of vibe that these guys give off. They're performers. They're exciting. They're excitable. I don't know.
But
It was cool.
but even this hunting trip, I know that they're going a little bit outside of Paris, and they try to make some justification about the fact that they're about to take out this um old money family, I suppose, along with whoever's in the house. Like it's like a big house party and whatever. But they comment or are like Armand comments, or at least he's commenting to Malloy about how they have to clean up after Louis and Claudia and how they're living so brashly and those kinds of things. But yet this particular incident at the end is like totally like complete hypocrisy, honestly, because they're essentially taking out at least 19 people. I think that's what they say,
Yeah.
um, in a spectacular fashion. Like this is not subtle. I guess the only thing you could say is that it's not necessarily like right in the heart of Paris. It seems like it's in the outskirts, and so maybe they're a little bit more secluded and have done some kind of reconnaissance and taken precautions about this. But it is a little like it's just a little bit rich, especially as they go about this. Like they are definitely not at all discreet here.
No.
Um, and then there's the other piece of it, which is, Louis is trying to kind of figure out whether I think that they're, especially after they see the portrait of Lestat, um, and know his connection with the theater, Louis is starting to get a little bit nervous and says something like he wants to figure out whether Lestat is dead or not. And this, I guess it isn't quite the first time. I guess they think it, or They just didn't necessarily look back, and we know that they didn't make certain that this was the case. But he goes to the solicitor that Lestat had used to sort of handle all their money stuff, and I thought that that was a pretty interesting scene. There was a little bit of subterfuge with the lawyer, and
Yeah, the
the
lawyer
lawyer.
knows a little too much.
Yep.
Um, Basically, he's like, I haven't heard from him in since what was it, 1940, and the war's over. So it's been several years.
And
Uh,
even more chilling is that he has something prepped to give Louis.
yeah,
It's essentially like a box with the last, like a farewell letter and probably other things in there, but
yeah. We don't
essentially,
do we don't really get to find out what else is in there, do we?
nope.
Just
We all,
the weird vision that he gets of
yep.
of Lestat.
Lestat. I mean, they have to bring him into the story somehow, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Because his presence is still there. He's still kind of haunting Louis and to some extent Claudia, but more Louis. And
Hmm.
then there, oh, the guilt, because the letter is like pretty. I mean, I wouldn't put it past Lestat to have prepped this all, and this is a total ruse, much like the Theater of the Vampires is a ruse, and that he has prepped the solicitor to say these things, that he's just toying with Louis, and this is absolutely a game. So I am almost convinced that that's actually what's going on. Um, and I say this as a person that obviously has spoilers and knows a little bit of what's to come. So that if that is the case, this is a pretty nice setup. But the interesting thing, though, is that later on it is revealed that Armand knows that he went to that solicitor.
Yeah, troubling to say the least. But I guess only Armand, because he's saying it in a way like the rest of this coven might members of this coven might overreact, might take the wrong idea, and you think too loudly when you think of Lestat.
Right.
So the whole, and he does give Claudia some props in that scene because he's like, she's very good at disguising her thoughts. You are not,
Mm-hmm.
Louis. And like not knowing what the various vampires' powers are is always it's nerve-wracking, and it should be for these two because they are potentially in hot water. And
Right.
it's too bad that Claudia can't see that foreshadowing.
There's also a little bit of and this is in again the Armand sort of setting himself apart from the rest of the coven, and he basically, while they are doing all of their theatrics, is always standing in the shadows, observing versus participating. And then when they go on their hunt, similarly, he stays outside with Louis. Louis doesn't have a desire to participate, in part, I think, because he wants to hang out with Armand. But Armand does not participate even when the hunt is sort of brought outside. And there is a little bit of a almost like, well, I'm a little too civilized for that. And um, even the warnings that he's giving Louis and the signals he's giving Louis are that the rest of the coven is more savage, I think, and not controllable. And so, again, I don't think that I think he is kind of walking that line with Louis, trying to make himself an ally, but also is serving the interests of the coven as well.
Hmm.
And so again, I am intrigued. I definitely thought that the latter half of this episode was much more like strong and interesting than the first half, but um, you know. And I'd also say Armand is trying to manipulate Malloy. So I do think that there isn't a mistake in terms of like when Malloy's pushing back and when Malloy's like doing his antagonistic thing, calling real Rashid, and just kind of taking digs at Armand. Um, Armand is plucking little things out of his head, really trying to actually like needle him. And there is like, it's interesting just to see how easily he does it, but also that Louis is complicit or maybe doesn't recognize that that's exactly what's going on. I don't know. So it's an interesting dynamic that they're setting up, and I want to see a little bit more of that. And I do think that there is like from Aloy's point of view, all this subterfuge is incredibly annoying to him, and he's just not tolerating it. So he does sort of break at the end in terms of like, yeah, you got me. This is a vulnerable thing. Because they dredge up memories of Alice, who he had proposed to and apparently said no. And it's such a reaction he has that he starts shaking and all that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But Armand is absolutely playing this to the hilt. And so you have to wonder what he's trying to distract Malloy from.
I'm trying to figure out where this is going to go because this is new. This is not from the books. There's no Armand Louis double
No.
interview. So I feel like the show is going to create a schism between them at the end of this interview. I feel like that's the only logical place it can go in a way, um, where the manipulation of Armand will come to light, and Louis and he will have a, well, they will break up or whatever, whatever vampires do after having dated for 100 years.
Well, I mean,
Uh,
I know what the schism is in the books, and I'm assuming it's got to be the same as what they're prepping here.
Well, yeah, like to what extent is Louis' memory completely messed up? Because he's talking about, if I don't think about certain things, Paris was a great time for me. And I'm like, this is literally, I mean, I don't want to spoil the meta plot for anybody who's not familiar with what happens in Paris. Maybe I don't know. What do you think, HA? Can I talk about it? Because it does feel a little bit like Blinders that he is like, yeah, Paris was a great time. We had a great time with Claudia. I mean, they're reading these like ripped pages from her diary.
In the photos, yep.
There's a lot nodding to the fact that she's not with us anymore in this plot so far.
I think we can say spoiler alert here. So if you haven't read the books, and assuming this is what they go to in the movies, so I'd stop, or in the movies, and
Yeah.
then I'm assuming they're going to go to in the show.
Right. Yeah,
But
they
it's
definitely get to all this in the movie. But so HA, I have not read the book in a while. I don't remember why Armand and Louis aren't on best terms at this point, but I know that Armand kills Claudia.
well, so the whole thing in the book is that Armand, um, and again, this is a reimagination. So you're right. The whole thing with Malloy and the Armand and Louis thing doesn't really happen. But in the books, um, Armand is the one who gives the order to kill Claudia. He is in charge of the whole theater, um, the coven, and he is the one that sort of adheres to whatever weird rules they have set up for their little clan.
He actually like condemns both of them and another vampire to death, but then swoops in and saves Louis, right?
And part of this is because, and again, spoilers, Lestat shows up, and so they have known all along that they killed Lestat, and so Louis is condemned for killing his maker, although apparently it was Claudia who did the deed, and that's how Louis got away from it. But um, there's a whole thing about making a child vampire, so Lestat's in trouble with them on that point. So there's a lot going on, but essentially Armand masks his involvement in making these orders and kind of claims that it was all the rest and kind of blames it on Santiago and the others for killing Claudia, but that it turns out that that's not the case. And when Louis eventually finds that out or this is revealed, Armand doesn't even like Armand just leaves him and goes, I know you cannot forgive me, and just kind of like takes off or something. So this is, I'm assuming this is the culmination that we're leading to, that it's going to be revealed that Armand was part of was the main person instigating her death, and that,
And that's gonna cause them to break up, but just 80 years after the fact.
I guess the question though is, and I have the same question, is like why Louise' memory is so gapped here.
Is it because this is a power of Armand as an ancient that he can
Maybe,
affect memory?
maybe. And Louis always been a little bit more passive and submissive than other vampires. And it's clear that he's under Armand's power. They even do that in the body language. Like Armand is like all over him, but it's very much Louis that is like under Armand's power. I think it's pretty clear just from a like physical standpoint.
Yeah, and the fact that Armand's always there, like even when he was pretending to be a human, he was always there, right? Like just lurking, needing to know what's going on, talking about like Louis sometimes loses track of things and I help him. He
Mhm.
said that at the end of the first season.
But my
I
guess
don't
is
know.
Is Armand affecting that, and that without physical evidence, and I think that's what the key is in terms of the pages being ripped out of Claudia's notebook. My guess is that those are some pretty unflattering recollections of something going on with Armand. And in the books, like the other vampires, like are speaking into her mind and saying like you're an abomination and things like that. So it
Yeah.
isn't all this warm and fuzzy stuff. So I do think it's interesting that they're lulling her into a sense of security and community here.
Well,
And
again, she's not a child. I mean,
no,
she's borderline a child. I don't think that that can be the fundamental reason why they think she needs to die.
I think
It'll be Lestat.
your thing probably is my guess. So that's probably what they're going to focus on.
But then it's attempted murder. Surely that's not a problem in vampire culture.
Although I will say Armand does make the comment to Louis that, oh, what she would have been like if she
Yeah.
had been a body that matched her mind. So there is an implication um about that piece. So I guess we'll wait to see it. And hopefully the next episode is actually more um quickly moving than this one, maybe not so much of a lead up. I do think that they are going to play out the intrigue about Lestat showing up, but we'll see. Um, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, at least the actor playing Lestat gets to show up every episode to haunt
Jahan.
Louis so far. But yeah, I think I'm still eager to find out what goes on next. I'm eager to see Ben Daniels. I'm eager to watch him continue to vamp and dominate the stage. He's really good as Santiago. Do you remember who played Santiago in the movie? It was
That was like Stephen Ray.
Rhea. Rhea, yeah.
And I would also say that when I saw him as portrayed as Santiago, I was very disappointed as well. So I do think that this Santiago, I approve much more of this particular rendition. So um, I'm all right with that. He's doing a great job.
Yeah, it's
He's very
te-
much a showman, and it's his manipulation is interesting. He's really good. And he does exactly kind of what I had imagined the Santiago would have done on stage. Although I will say in the book, Armand does take a part of this and he is in the last scene. And there's like a whole thing where the victim mistakes him for an angel. So that they did change that and they made Santiago more of like the big bad in this case.
he comes down as he's a member of the cast.
Right. And he's a very significant member. So in this case, they're putting Santiago there. So
Yeah.
maybe they flip it a little bit and Santiago is the person in power, but it still feels like Armand is like the person that's pulling the strings.
But they also say that like during the murder mansion scene, which is what they were calling it on set, which is pretty funny. Armand says he doesn't need to feed because he's old enough that he doesn't need to, which we know is actually canon
Right.
for ancient, quote unquote ancient vampires in this franchise. And so I guess why would he need to be on stage eating people when he
True.
can let these 13 other younger vampires get in on that action?
True. So yeah. So there it is.
There it all is.
So hopefully there will be a new episode. If not, we'll figure out something else to talk about. But I think
Oh,
it's supposed to be coming out this week.
well, yeah, let's keep an eye out. And then we'll come on back and keep talking about it. If we don't have more of this to talk about, we'll figure something out. You can let us know what you're thinking of the show so far, season two, on at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. Our episodes are all posted online at reanimated.podbean.com. And we will be back soon enough to continue talking about this or something else. And we hope you come along for the ride. So thank you for listening.
Indeed. Ciao.